Thank you, Hattie, and hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen now, which hopefully will work. Hopefully, everybody can see that. I'm going to focus on quite a scary point early on in our practice when understanding numbers and getting the fees right was pretty much make or break. So when we first set up as three directors, and our income as directors was really closely linked to the fees. We did the work, we billed it, and we got paid, and it was quite straightforward. But quite unexpectedly in 2018, we grew from pretty much three and a half to 11 people within a space of 6 months, which was totally unplanned. And suddenly we had, for us, really significant overheads and had to find salaries for a growing team. And our profit, from which the directors got paid, was suddenly quite a small portion of our overall turnover, and it had to come second. So we urgently had to understand our business in a new way and look at the numbers. And the first thing that we established was that we needed to meet a 20% minimum profit now in order for the directors to get paid and for the business to work. And in looking at all of these numbers, we quite terrifyingly realized that our basic fee income that year was only just about covering our costs. So we had to do something about it. So the first thing we did was we carried out a complete overhaul of all of our fees that had to be existing projects only to start with. That's what we had to work with. So we went back and we adjusted all of our, exercised all of our appointments correctly, adjusted the percentages where they needed to be, recouped every additional fee we possibly could. And in that year, we managed to recover 15% of our turnover, which was broadly the difference between being paid and not being paid. And that taught us a huge amount that maybe if we'd grown more slowly and organically, we wouldn't have actually had to face reality of that. But the key lesson for us going forward was that we should be basing our fees on fact. And actually, it was really important for us at that point to get our residential fee proposals sorted because it was 60% of our turnover and we wanted to grow the practice. And so in getting those right, we were able to do that, but also take on a more diverse range of projects, which is what we wanted to do. So I'm going to just very quickly run through a residential fee proposal. The first one for the kind of new form of company that we felt we got right, but I'm also going to compare it to what we were doing before, just to highlight the areas in which we were going wrong quite dramatically. So simple residential extension in London, budget of 275, ended up being 635 at the end and took 2.5 years to complete. So the old us before, we were typically benchmarking our fees around 12% for this type and scale of project, but we had gone as low as 10% before we had a team. This was actually achievable. And our fee structure at this point was very simply based as such. It was all percentage, 40% 1 to 3, 40% in stage 4, and a woefully low 20% of the overall fee in stage 5. And so collecting data was really important, and we had done so for this project. And this was the reality of delivering this residential project with our new company, with proper overheads and paying a team. So whereas it might have just about worked before, you can see we made a profit up to planning, but totally hemorrhaged money in 4 and 5, and spent many times over whatever profit we'd made in the early stages. But the critical thing now being that, of course, this was costing us. And at this particular point in our practice, this would have cost us £51,000 to deliver this at this loss. And you only have to do a few of those without realizing it and tracking those numbers to come seriously unstuck. It wouldn't have been all that bad, though. We would have adjusted our percentages as we went along, but we didn't really generally retrospectively adjust our percentage fees. And you can see from that 10% how quickly, just across 3 adjustments to completion, that 10% fee we thought we were working towards and the client thought that they were paying was actually 6.3% of the construction budget. But even if we had adjusted retrospectively and done everything we should have by the book, this graph just goes to show how our appointments weren't working for us. They weren't fit for purpose. Percentage in stage 5 just didn't work. And effectively, our appointments were setting us up to fail. And there's absolutely nothing we could have done about it. So taking that data, we just pretty much took the shape of that graph and we said, okay, we've got to redesign our fees to work for us. So we just made some relatively small changes. We knew that in Reba 1, we needed to be competitive. We were all working in a competitive market. So for us, fixing Reba 1 made sense because we could easily control what we were spending. For this type and scale of project, residential around 500,000, we knew that 8% would cover 2 to 4 and make a profit. But for 5 and 6, we simply had to charge on a weekly basis going forward. So by making some relatively minor adjustments to the way we presented our fee, and I say that because, it's small fixed fee, 8% and weekly, very easy for a client to understand. The number they come away with is 8%. We're actually starting in real terms with a 15% fee. And that meant that we could actually turn that huge loss with those small shifts into a profit on a project of this scale. So making 17%. And if you remember earlier, we needed 20, so it wasn't quite good enough. This project, like many others, demonstrates the importance of capturing all those additional fees that typically we just weren't charging for, doing a favor to a client, doing some planning amendments, designing a kitchen free. We're all guilty of it, doing stage 4 work in stage 5, just because that's where the program says we are.
You've got 1 minute out.
Thank you. So we had to move on. So by doing that and charging on the additional fees, we met 26%, we met our profit target, and we had some money left over to invest in the company. And that 8% fee in real terms was 17. And this was really important for us because doing this enabled us to get the cash and the confidence to grow the practice and to do that broader range of projects we wanted. So in summary, an early scare taught us the importance of setting fees based on data, fact, structuring them to fit based on the reality of our business, nobody else's. The importance of exercising fee agreements fully, adjusting percentages to the max and charging additional fees where they're due, monitoring project performance closely, and the value of the data in setting benchmarks for fees across all scales within the practice, preventing bad fee agreements from arising in the first place, and continually refining and updating this. Thank you.